So how are we defining these tiers? So S tier is the game cannot exist without it, or the game would be significantly worse without this keyword. A is I like this keyword a lot and it functions well, the community likes it, everything about it is overall pretty good. B is just the definition of mid. It is okay. If it comes back in the future, that's okay. If it never comes back again, that's also okay. C is reserved for those ones that are just like below average, as C tier alludes. So these are mechanics that if they come back, the community will be a kind of bummed, and I'll be bummed too. And D is for just those parasitic mechanics that nobody wants to see again, and overall just makes the game a lot worse. So, with all that being said, this tier list is based off of impact to the game, general community, how much they like it, and just vibes. How much do I like it? So let's jump into adapt. So adapt is, I believe, from Ungoro, and when something adapts, it gets one of a few keywords. The main ones being like Wind Fury or +3 damage was the ones that you typically want to see because these were usually put like on aggressive minions, like our friend Crackling Razor Maw right here. So I obviously love Crackling Razor Maw. He's my avatar at the time of this recording. So I really like this little fella, and I like Adapt. But unfortunately, Adapt is a little boring. So I'm actually gonna put it at B. If it comes back, that'd be great. Maybe with some updated keywords. I think the current keywords are kind of boring. So Adapt, solid B. Could live with or without it. The definition of a B tier keyword. Now off to the most clear S tier keyword of all. This will likely be in this number one spot for the remainder of this tier list. Battle Cry. What does Hearthstone or any card game look like without a enter the battlefield or battle cry effect? So easiest S tier of my life. And now we have the opposite of an S tier mechanic, and we have good old Charge has been here since the very beginning of the game and has been an absolute disaster to design around. Charge is just kind of terrible. I mean, like, back in the day, the devs of Hearthstone said that they didn't want to print more cards with Charge, and then they quickly ran back with that, and now we have even more Charge in the game now more than ever. So, bummed to see that, and I would love to just see Charge get the boot eventually. Next, we have Choose One. This is pretty tied to the Druid class. I don't think there's any other class that has Choose One cards outside of like some multi-class thing that I'm not thinking of right now. And it like feels pretty good. I like modal cards, things that give you multiple options when you're playing it. I like that kind of feeling. So I think Choose One is a solid A tier for both representing Druid very well and also just playing very nicely. Next, we have Colossal, which came out of Voyage to the Sunken City. And this is like a pretty neat mechanic. It's like a big old minion that comes with a bunch of different parts. Neptulon here is a 10 mana 7/7 with Wind Fury and comes with two 4/2s with Immune. And whenever he attacks, those 4/2s attack instead. So, pretty cool mechanic. And I feel like the whole cycle was relatively balanced. I typically like these mechanics that really make a big boy and then just has you battle your opponent's big boy with your big boy. I think that's a good play pattern and just like feels very impactful to the game. So I'm feeling it's like an A or a B. Just like the general vibe of Colossal is very good. And I think it was also well designed for the most part. So you know what? I'm gonna have our adept buddy right here take a backseat to that fella. Next we have combo. Combo, much like with choose one representing druid, combo is very tied to the rogue class, and it's really hard to put this with Nourish and the choose one cards because much like with charge, it's really hard to design these combo cards, it turns out, and like making sure that the effect feels powerful enough to have to go through that little loop to enable combo, but also making it not too broken when the combo is just way too pushed is a very hard thing to balance. So I'm actually gonna. It also just kind of feels good to play with, though. It feels like you're rewarded for like holding your combo cards and like waiting till a good opportunity to play them. I talked myself into it. That's an A tier. Behind choose one, but this will probably end up being a low A tier. Next, we have a recent addition with the Death Knight class. Actually, when did when did Death Knight come out? Okay, never mind. It wasn't a recent addition. Death Knight came out 3 years ago, and I've been playing this game for way too long. Anyway, corpses. Death Knight's main mechanic is like a resource that's like mana, where you get a corpse every time something dies. And this mechanic honestly just feels amazing. It really fits the flavor of the class, and really, I can't imagine the class existing without this now that it's like so ingrained with Death Knight. And it feels so good. In fact, that's going right at the top of A tier for now. Okay, now for Corrupt. This came out in the Madness of the Dark Moon Fair expansion, and it was like, this mechanic felt okay. In order to enable Corrupt, you have to play something with a higher mana value than this card, and then it gets a little bit better. So in the case of this example, you need to play a 2 or more mana card, and then this here, what the heck is this card called? I haven't played with Corrupt cards in a minute. Where is it? Stage Dive. So when it's corrupted, you give the minion you draw +2/+1. Very small buff to this corrupt card, but it felt pretty good. It felt pretty organic, and I can easily see it coming back in the future when this like corrupting mechanic comes back. It seems like this would come back very easily, like with any old god set, corrupt can come back. So you know what? I'm actually it's between A and B because like it did feel good to play because it made these weaker cards better in the late game, and I really like mechanics that do that. But at the same time, it's not like that interesting. So I'm gonna put it at a solid high B tier. If it comes back, that's cool. If it doesn't, I'm not crying over it. Counter. Not many cards have counter. The first one to have it, of course, is counter spell. Pretty much the mechanic means if your opponent were to do something, instead they don't. And I think these mechanics in card games should exist, and you should be able to interact with your opponent and tell them no sometimes. If you're not allowed to tell your opponent no, we might as well just boot up a game of solitaire and, watch that cool card animation with them like bouncing, that like maybe I should play that instead of Hearthstone. Anyway, I'm gonna say counter is a solid between adapt and colossal because it's kind of boring like adapt, but like also I think it should exist in the game, but very sparingly. And they've been doing a good job of doing that because not many cards have just counter. So let's take a break from the A and B tier for a second and just jam another S tier real quick. Just this is kind of like the counter to Battle Cry, Death Rattle. Something happens when this fella dies. For Loot Hoarder, you draw a card. Again, something dies, you get an effect. That is in so many card games, and it's also in Hearthstone. And I also cannot imagine this game without Death Rattle. Now, Discover. I think Discover is a very polarizing keyword in the community, but a very heavy weight on this tier list is vibes, in my personal opinion. And I freaking love Discover. I started playing the game during Ungoro, and Discover was pretty popular in Ungoro. And I just think like Hearthstone is a random game at its very core. I know some people try to say it's an esport and it should also have a competitive scene, but I think first and foremost, this game is a silly goose game, and it is a mobile game that you play to kill time, and it's also pretty fun. And we should really celebrate keywords that lean into that randomness and that fun. Does losing to a randomly discovered card sometimes feel bad? Sure. I mean, that's just kind of the name of the game. That is Hearthstone. It is a random card game that is built for digital only. So I am actually I'm gonna put an S, purely for vibes and just for my love of Discover and just crushing my opponent with random cards. Discover is a clear S in my mind. I'm sure that will go over well. Next, we have Divine Shield. Divine Shield is very synonymous with Paladin. It's kind of creeped into some other classes after it was first introduced in Alpha and Beta, but it is very close to the Paladin class, and I'm actually going to put it, behind combo. It's kind of boring, but I also can't really imagine Paladin without it, so I'm going to put it in A tier, but it's not as interesting as combo, so we're going to put it right behind combo. Dormant. Dormant is has been explored in a variety of different ways. I kind of like the effect of like a looming presence, like a countdown timer. And then once the countdown is done, you have like to deal with a big scary monster like a 2020, like with our main man Darkness right here. The problem with Dormant is you have to make the payoff worth the wait because you're often taking your turn off just to play a 4 mana do nothing, for example. So you need the payoff to be good. And unfortunately for our friend right here, the Darkness, a 2020 without any effects isn't worth the wait of his clause to draw 3 candles, I believe it is. But I think the design space for Dormant can be explored a lot more. So I'm gonna put it right behind Corrupt because the feeling of Dormant is very solid. Just there's a big baddie coming, you got to do something, kill your opponent before the darkness is here, or like get an answer ready for the darkness is maybe more of an accurate play pattern with this guy. Anyway, I think Corrupt or Dormant rather is a very solid mechanic and will slot in right behind Corrupt. So I've been giving only like alpha and beta mechanics, these A and S tier, as well as corpses, very synonymous with specific classes or their alpha and beta keywords. But we now have Dredge, and Dredge is like a fantastic mechanic. I think the reason so many people love Dredge is it kind of fixes what Discover does. So with Dredge, you're only looking at the bottom 3 cards of your deck. So you put those cards there. So it's not necessarily random, but you do also get some selection, which is why I love Discover. I love being able to select my cards in my card games, and Dredge allows you to do that. And I would absolutely love to see Dredge make a comeback. And I'm actually gonna, you know what? Top of A it goes. I really want Dredge to come back. So this is my campaign to make Dredge come back in a very upcoming set. Maybe Emerald Dreams, maybe? That'd be cool. Anyway, let's go off to Echo. Echo is a mechanic and a half. It's definitely memorable. Kind of on the boring side, so I kind of want to put it with Adapt. Mm, yeah, I'll put it right below Adapt because I'm tired of disrespecting my boy Razor Maw right here. So Echo will go right under that. Next, we have Elusive. And like how I said, counter is a good ability because like you want to be able to interact with your opponent, and it's good to interact with your opponent, and you should have a like you should be able to get punished for your plays, and is pretty much what I'm getting at. Elusive kind of just ignores that, and honestly, the vibes, just the pure vibes of Elusive is trash. So C tier, congratulations, Bear Shark. You are the one and only C tier that we have here. But don't you worry, Bear Shark. You're gonna have some company because we have Excavate. And Excavate, like it's a fine mechanic. Excavate felt good. The mining decks felt fine, but I really don't see how this mechanic will come back. And I feel like the treasures have been played a lot and people are just kind of bored of them. I know I like have this end of B tier that is like the boring keywords, but Excavate, it's pretty boring at this point. So Bear Shark, And Excavate can be pals in this C tier right here. So next we have Finale, and the whole thing with Finale is if you spend all of your available mana on this spell, you get a bonus effect. So let's go check out our Finale cards real quick. So let's just take the first one. Hardcore Cultist. It's a battle cry of deal 2 damage, but if you finale it, it deals that damage to all enemies. So you get a benefit if this is your last spell, pretty much, or your last card. And I think that play pattern is absolutely awesome. I think having to plan your turns to make sure your finale is online, and also to weigh the benefit of maybe you just want to deal 2 damage to a single target and you don't necessarily want to finale it, you can have that flexibility. And I love flexibility, as we saw with Choose One. So I'm actually gonna put finale as an A tier, maybe a very low A tier, just because I want to see more of this kind of effect that rewards players for planning out their turns a little better. Speaking of mechanics that reward you for planning out your turns, Forge is exactly that, but it rewards people for planning out their future turns as well. You just need to figure out a way to weasel in that 2 mana investment to forge a card. And what happens, it's very similar to Finale. Let's go check out our forge cards actually. Let's pull up the warrior ones because those are by far the most played ones. So Sanitize is a 6 mana spell that deals damage equal to your armor to all minions. But if you forge it first, you gain 4 armor and then do that effect. So forging it was often very beneficial, and you would want to figure out a way to make that 2 mana investment in an earlier turn so that you can set up a big AoE early or later rather. And I really, really like this mechanic. When it was first spoiled, I was the biggest hater because the thought of having to spend 2 mana to do nothing, I just don't like. But when I actually got my hands on these cards, they just felt so good. And also, you got Ignis as a payoff, which allowed you to craft a very big, beefy weapon. Yeah, here he is. Battlecry, if you forged a card this game, craft a custom weapon. And these custom weapons are absolutely stupid. They're so good. And often made it worth it to run these forged cards, at least in the warrior class. So I absolutely love this mechanic. It seems tough to fit it in a future set just thematically. So I'm gonna put it next to Corrupt. I think these two are in the same tier of they felt good, but they might be tough to fit in future sets. Okay, we have another polarizing effect with Freeze. So Freeze is very similar to Counter and Discover, where people hate losing to Counter and they hate losing to randomly discovered cards. But Freezing also represents the Mage class and is a phenomenal way to stop these swarming aggressive decks. And I think that is a very good thing to have in card games. Is a control deck must be able to beat an aggressive deck. If you're an aggro deck and you lose to control and you are upset, um, I just kind of get over it, I guess, because that is not a matchup you should win consistently. So I think Freeze does exactly what it's set out to do. It's set out to defeat aggressive decks and also be kind of worthless against combo decks. And also it represents the mage class well of just being a spell slinger that also annoys your opponents into concession. So for that reason, I'm going to put it right in front or behind Divine Shield. I think Divine Shield feels better to play against and is also equally as boring as Freeze. So I'm going to put it right behind Divine Shield. The next mechanic is a mechanic that I think was not very well explored in the set that it came out. I think the card that I'm holding right here is the only playable Frenzy card that we really saw in standard at least. Maybe it was an absolute powerhouse in arena, but I'm not an arena gamer. Actually, you know what? Druid of the Plains was actually played a little bit in standard, if I recall correctly. Um, oh wait, never mind. Efficient Octobot was like in a tier 1 deck. Anyway, maybe Frenzy is actually insane when was explored perfect. Was that the only cards that was played? Oh wait, this was played as well. Um, yeah, I'm yeah, okay. Sorry, Frenzy. Let's put you right here. I want to see Frenzy again. But Frenzy was played quite a bit. So the next mechanic is Gigantify. And I think Gigantify is now I'm gonna get on a soapbox real quick. I think Gigantify is exactly what I don't want Hearthstone mechanics to be. This is just like you play a 1 mana 1/1 that also gives you a rusher, so it's already a fantastic card, but you also get additional value off of it. That just seems like it's an overtuned card. Why does this give you more value? It's already a great card. Gigantify, I think, is kind of what's wrong with modern card game design of you get a decently statted minion with value. I just I typically don't like that kind of design philosophy, so I'm gonna put it in C tier. Tempting to put it in D tier, but it's nowhere near as parasitic as Charge. So I'm gonna put it in the low C tier because I'm just kind of tired of these like already efficient minions coming with value. It allows aggressive decks to just have way too much lasting power. Anyway, Gigantify, C tier. Stop giving aggressive minions tacked on value. Next, we have a mechanic that I actually like quite a bit of being honorable kill. The reason I like honorable kill is because it rewards players for doing what things that they should already be doing, which is value trading. And I like mechanics that teach new players very core skills like value trading so that they can learn that this is a good thing to do and they should do it in the future. The only thing with honorable kill is it needs to be balanced, that the benefit isn't too great because honestly, doing honorable kill shouldn't even have a reward most of the time. So making this a very small reward is exactly what you should do, and I think it's what they did do. Because from what I recall, honorable kill actually didn't see too terrible amount of play. I know Siphon Mana saw quite a bit of play. Dragonbane Shot actually had to be nerfed because of not honorable kill, because quest lines are busted, which I will get into in a second. And also Frostbite was pretty decent. But other than that, I think honorable kill didn't show up way too much. And I think that's great. I think honorable kill should be balanced very well. And um, I think this is a solid, I want to see it again. And also, there is some design space to explore, like these 4 cards right here. Stone Tusk Boar just got a new friend, and that is with Immune. I think Immune and Charge are very similar, where they should be used very sparingly because the effects are just way too good. Not being able to damage something or target something is incredibly lame. So, like Elusive, but instead it just can't take damage. So, right here I have Timeout. But the most iconic Immune card, of course, everybody guessed it, it's Ice Block. This has been a problematic card ever since it was put into the game, and these type of effects should be used very sparingly. And honestly, I don't really see much of a reason for them to be used like Ice Block and Timeout are used. So I want to see this effect very little to almost none. So solid D tier for Immune here. So Infuse. Infuse was a mechanic that I loved a lot. Specifically the card right here. What's it called? Frozen Touch. Frozen Touch was amazing. It's very similar to the card Corpsicle, actually. It's almost exactly the same as Corpsicle, but it was given to Mage. But one thing that Infuse had going for it was that Death Knight was not in the game yet. And Death Knight benefits greatly from things dying, so I could see Infuse being kind of difficult to design in the future. But I am also a Death Knight fanboy, and um, that for that reason, it's going to be easy A tier. Um, no more, no more discussion. Just purely based off of my opinion alone. This will likely be a problem if it comes back in the game. Anyway, Inspire. good old Inspire. Everybody's punching bag. Everybody hates Inspire. And honestly, I think Inspire could be explored more. I think the issue with Inspire is the effects that you got from satisfying the Inspire requirement was just way too little, and that is a big reason these cards fell flat. We previously saw that Forge was a 2 mana investment that benefited this card to enough of a level that made them playable. And I think if you just increase the benefit of Inspire, it could actually be a pretty solid mechanic. So I'm actually going to put it in the B tier right in front of Counter. I'm not going to put it with these four other mechanics that I want to see in the future because honestly, Inspire is might just be a doomed mechanic that you can't balance any way to make it feel good. So, in the off chance that it's just a terrible mechanic, I'm just going to put it in the middle of B tier. So, very similar story with Excavate. We have Invoke, which is the Galakron effect that only works with Galakron, so it can only exist in a set that has Galakron in it. Very restrictive. So, pretty easy C tier right next to Excavate. And also very easy C tier with lackeys. I actually really liked lackeys, but I think much like with the Invoke and Excavate, it's hard to imagine them being in a future set. So I think it's going to be a C tier for me. And honestly, I won't be crying if they never come back. And now we have Lifesteal. So I think Lifesteal is an easy A tier. And I think I'm actually going to put it right next to Divine Shield. The only caveat I have with Lifesteal is way too much stuff has Lifesteal these days. I think they need to tone down how much stuff has Lifesteal because it feels like they just give this keyword out to any minion these days. And I don't think that's good for the game. I think the game is in a better spot when this kind of easy access to healing only exists in a select few classes. And if you give lifesteal to every class, this mechanic of gaining life just is a lot less unique to priest, paladin, and that's about it. Let priest and paladin be the healing classes and stop giving lifesteal to everything. Next, we have magnetic, which is one of the few keywords that's specific to just a tribe. And I think magnetic and mechs benefit so much from this keyword and feels so good that I'm actually just going to put it right next to Divine Shield. I know it doesn't define a class, but defining a tribe in such an effective and fun way, I think it's just an easy A tier for me. Now we have March of the Lich King's own Mana Thirst ability, which actually is very similar to Corrupt now that I think about it. It's a effect that ultimately makes your spells and minions better when you have excess mana. So on turns 2 through 5, Conjured Arrow just deals 2 damage. But if you have 6 mana or more, you also draw that mini card. So you pretty much deal 2, draw 2, when it's turn 6 or greater with a Conjured Arrow. And again, like Corrupt, I like mechanics that make low power cards actually valuable later in the game, and Mana Thirst does exactly that, and I think the design space can be explored a lot more in the future, and I'd honestly love to see this mechanic come back. So you know what, for that reason, I just said I would love to see it come back. Let's put it right there. Right next to Infused. And you know what? We're making a snap judgment. Corrupt. Congratulations, you got promoted. Congratulations again. Next we have Mega Wind Fury, everyone's favorite big boy keyword. It's on the main man walking fountain and like 2 or 3 other minions. And I think this mechanic is very fun and it should be not used much. Easy C tier. Next, we have Gigantify's little brother, Minimize, C tier. Same reasons as Gigantify. Stop giving these big boys even more value. They're already so big. And now we have Demon Hunter's Outcast. And I think this has to go in A, just based off of the other explanations for Choose One, Combo, Divine Shield. But I think this keyword has just kind of been misdesigned in a while, where most classes would just get this effect, but for some reason, Demon Hunter oftentimes needs to jump through hoops just to get the same effect. So I think they could increase the power of some Outcast cards to make it actually feel special. But ultimately, I think this is a pretty neat mechanic and like introduces hand management to Hearthstone, which is very cool. So I'm actually going to put this right in front of Lifesteal. Next, we have a mechanic that came out, I believe, in 2023 and exists, I think, exclusively for Priest and represents the Priest class very well with Overheal. So, Overheal is, of course, an effect that you get a benefit when something is overhealed. Very well named. Good job, Blizzard. Ultimately, feels pretty good. There's archetypes that are built around these type of effects, and overall, pretty solid. Kind of boring, but pretty solid. Next, we have Overkill, and this is Honorable Kill's little brother that was kind of not super popular from what I remember. Um, let's take a trip down memory lane and look up some Overkill cards. I think Baited Arrow was played, Blast Wave was played in some Control Mage decks. No, not really. Maybe? There's like a silly wild OTK combo with this, but outside of silly OTK combos, I think Overkill was not very much played. Actually, Undasta. Undasta was played. So we had one and a half, maybe two cards played with this keyword. Where'd he go? There he is. Um, so I think this mechanic was kind of mismanaged, and I think we could explore it again, but at the same time, it was very not well received. I'm not sure if that's because these cards weren't good, but also it just kind of didn't feel good to play with. So I'm actually gonna put this low C tier. Overload is another mechanic that represents a class, being Shaman. But historically, Overload's been a very difficult mechanic to balance, actually, with many of these Overload costs being just way too cheap for the benefit that they give you. And for that reason, I think that this is going to be low A tier. And it's now just dawning on me that this is the exact same explanation that I gave Combo. So I'm going to just slide this one right down next to Overload. So they're about to fall off A tier, but I think they just need to be here because they represent their classes fairly well. Next, we have good old Poisonous. So Poisonous, I think, just goes next to Lifesteal. Um, it's boring, needs to be in the game. When something with poisonous hurts you, you die. Makes sense. A tier. Next, we have original quests. And this might be a little controversial, but I think quests are so freaking cool. For the same reason Dormant is cool. Having this countdown to just a final big reward for your opponent is like a pretty cool mechanic, and I'm definitely going to see this in the future. I think Blizzard likes designing quests. I think casual players also like quests. It makes deck building easier, makes games a little repetitive, and when the quests are not very balanced like the caverns below, they can be a little annoying, but overall I think the design of quests is very solid. And now time for Quest's little brother of side quests. This is D tier. I think the reason quests are so cool is because you give up something for the quest, which is your turn one play. For quest lines, you give up your turn one, but because you get rewarded throughout the reward track of this quest line, it doesn't feel like you're being punished. So in that respect, it kind of takes the downside of quests and throws in the garbage and just allows you to have like a small value engine instead, which just doesn't seem like a well designed mechanic. So I would very much appreciate if these never come back. Quick draw is actually a mechanic that I've utilized a lot in standard recently, and I think it is kind of lame. I think it's rewarding people for drawing the right card at the right time is historically a very lame mechanic in multiple card games. In Magic, I think it was called Miracle, and historically people hated Miracle, and I think my hatred for Quick Draw is kind of carrying over from my Magic playing days. So I'm gonna put Quick Draw near Lackeys. I think Quick Draw is kind of lame. So C tier, never come back. Thank you very much. Reborn. Reborn is just Divine Shield. Yep, it's pretty much just Divine Shield. It's cool. I like it. It's neat. Recruit's trash. Recruit is the whole mechanic of recruit is mana cheating. And balancing mana cheating has always been very hard for every card game, and just having this mechanic is not a good idea. I don't think recruit has many cards that were playable, but I could be wrong. So let's clear our filters. Let's clear some filters. Um Grizzled Guardian. She was played quite a bit. Yeah, Katharina. Um oh, Possess Lackey. Right. People did like Possess Lackey. But like honestly, people didn't like Dragon Hatcher. People didn't like Master Hokart. And also, it just dawned on me. You know who pretty much has recruit? This guy. It's just recruit three minions from your deck that are from different expansions. And this guy sucks. This guy's terrible. Yeah, yeah, D tier. Freaking Dungar was trying to hide that he was actually a recruit card. Never bring this back. Recruit is very parasitic, and mana cheating should be avoided when possible, and recruit is just everything mana cheating. Next, we have Rush, which is fixed charge, and I think it's what charge should have always been. And we will likely see it forever and ever until this game finally leaves the servers. So I'm going to put it very at the top end of A tier just because it's a beautifully designed keyword. And honestly, I can't really see the game without it. That sounds like an S tier, doesn't it? Rush is S tier. Okay. Secrets. Now, this might be my hottest take of this tier list. So, you know how I said counter should exist because you should be able to counterplay your opponent and you should be able to have some agency in stopping your opponent on their turns. And also, elusive is lame because it takes away that option. Secrets does that twofold. It gives this mechanic to, I believe, four classes historically. Mage and Hunter has it as of today, and then Rogue and Paladin have it in Wild. And honestly, I think Paladin should keep having it because it fits the class very well. But I think secrets are just what makes Hearthstone Hearthstone, and I cannot imagine secrets not being in the game. So for that reason, secrets are S tier. Yeah, I feel good about that. Side quests. Side quests are sick. Side quests are so dope. So I'm gonna put side quests A tier easily, but where? You know what? I'm such a lover of side quests because I think it fixes what quests are about. It doesn't start in your opening hand. And also, it's a small enough effect that it doesn't feel backbreaking. Let's check out what side quests did. So, side quests. I think the Hunter one was played quite a bit. Secure the Deck was also played. Yep, Toxic Reinforcements was awesome. Um, Strength in Numbers was actually played too. Clear the Way was fine. Elemental Ally. Was all these playable? Righteous Cause was playable. Sanctuary wasn't. This isn't a side. Wait, actually, it is a side quest. Edora has a side quest. It just dawned on me that this is a side quest. Anyway, side quests are sick. Most of them are very well balanced and not overtuned and just feel fantastic. So, side quests, that's an A tier. That's an A tier in my mind. Silence. Silence needs to exist. You shouldn't be able to go tall with a bunch of auras and a bunch of buff spells and go unanswered. Silence needs to exist, and I think silence would honestly be good to see this more, which is kind of crazy to think. I just feel like keywords have gotten a little crazy. I mean, look all these keywords. They've gotten absolutely insane. So I'm gonna put silence right next to side quest. Spell damage now. Okay, so spell damage historically very difficult to balance. The most recent offender of spell damage being very good is Ethereal Oracle, which we all know needed to be nerfed, very overtuned. Um, but honestly, spell damage shouldn't be S tier because I can imagine the game without it, but it is kind of very ingrained in Hearthstone, and I kind of want to put it maybe just behind the very class specific mechanics that aren't combo and overload. Yeah, that feels good. Yeah, I like that. Next, we have a very similar effect, Spell Burst. I think Spell Burst is awesome and might be an evergreen effect now. Very similar to Spell Damage, so I'm just going to put them right next to each other. We have one of the newer keywords now of starships that was introduced in the Great Dark Beyond, and I used to love starships. I think starships were so cool before the StarCraft mini set came out. I know starships were kind of not great before that set came out, but I actually think that set with the mana reducers to launching the starships made the older ones completely irrelevant almost outside of Arcanite Defense Crystal. So I think the original starships are just so bad compared to the StarCraft ones now that this whole fleet, if you will, of starships is kind of irrelevant now. Um, so for that reason, I kind of just like don't want them to come back because it feels like they can't exist without StarCraft cards. I'm gonna put it in C tier. I think they used to feel great. I would put it at high B tier before StarCraft came out, but now with those mana reducers, it's C tier, unfortunately. Starter game effects, most notably represented by Gen and Baku. And if you played during that era, you know how annoying this was. And I might catch a little bit of flack for this. Prince Renethal should be right there with Gen and Baku. The only difference is you can actually nerf Prince Renethal to give 35 health. Gen and Baku you couldn't nerf. It was impossible, so they just had to Hall of Fame it. But I think start of game effects are very rare to come by, and honestly, they should be. And honestly, I think they are kind of lame. So D tier, I think start a game is pretty lame. And next we have a fixed version of elusive, I think, with stealth. And I think stealth is perfectly fine, perfectly boring, and perfectly right next to lifesteal. Next, we have our sixth and final S tier. I want to say final, looking ahead a little bit. I don't think any of these are S tier. Um, Taunt. Um, they can't. This game can't function without taunt. Actually, yeah, these are the three mechanics that just this game can't exist without. Rush goes to the back of the line. Yep, S tier looks perfect. Taunt is synonymous with Hearthstone. You need a way to put a roadblock in front of aggressive decks, and Taunt is beautifully done that. Temporary. Temporary shows up very little, and I wish it kind of would show up more. I think fleeting resources is very cool, and I think similar to Forge, you need to plan your turns in order to make your temporary resources worthwhile. So I'd like to see more of this, and I hope we do in the future. Titans. Titans is kind of Like on paper, it's kind of similar to Colossus, but I think it was kind of mismanaged, and the Titans were very powerful outside of the Warrior and I believe Demon Hunter ones. I think the rest were at least played a little bit, and I think I'm gonna put them on low B tier and not right next to Colossal. I would rather see Colossal before Titans. Um, yeah, I think Titans were kind of okay. I mean, they were very powerful, but I just kind of don't want to see them again. Tourists. Tourists are C tier, but where? Where in C tier? They are not as lame as Quick Draw, and I'll put it right next to good old Bear Shark. The reason I don't like Tourist is I would rather have multi-class cards. Being able just to explore a different class, but the caveat is you need this Tourist, I think isn't very good for the game, especially when the tourists are as overtuned as Linessa here. I think the benefit of exploring to a different class should be the main benefit. Also, being a very powerful minion like Linessa, I think, is just kind of a miss from a design perspective. Tradable. I think tradable is maybe one of the best mechanics that have been introduced in modern Hearthstone. It's not S tier. I think it's just right next to Dredge. Like it's almost, you know what? It's like teetering on S. Yeah. Tradable is teetering on S. We're probably going to see more of this in the future, especially with like tech cards like Speaker Stomper. Um, yeah, I think tradable is a very elegant keyword, and we're likely going to see so much more of it in the future. So now we have Twin Spell. So Twin Spell, I actually think is the exact same as Gigantify Miniaturize. Yeah, stop giving stop giving classes or cards just tacked on value. Um, I think with Twin Spell, they did a better job of balancing it because most of them were just like mediocre spells that you would like not play on its own, but since it had Twin Spell, it was playable. I think the only one that was nerfed was Rapid Fire, and that was because of Questline Hunter, not because of Twin Spell being good. Oh, Conjurer's Calling and Ray of Frost. Right. You know what? No, that it deserves to be right next to Gigantify and Miniaturize. And now we have Wind Fury. It's a boring mechanic, but it is necessary. So A tier. And you know what? I think this is like pretty much what I want this tier list to look like. I'm gonna give it a once over and report back on the things that I changed. So 1 second. Let's see what we got. All right. So a few changes. I moved Dormant to be an A tier because I think this mechanic is just super cool, and I think it should just be almost evergreen at this point. It just needs to be designed, I think, a little better, and I could see this being in a lot of future sets. So Dormant, solid, almost not solid A tier, and I was being unfair to Combo and Overload. They should be right next to the other class specific keywords. So I'm just going to put them right back up there. They're perfectly fine to be right next to Outcast and Overheal. And I believe the only other change was Titans is now C tier. I'm a hater. This might just be because I'm a hater of Titans, but you know what? I can sleep very comfy at night knowing that Titans is in C tier and being very comfortable with never seeing this mechanic ever again. I really hope it never comes back. Anyway, that's the tier list. Very subjective, not opinionated at all, and it is a should be the golden standard of how we interpret keywords moving forward.